Nobody really wants to talk about money. Like, genuinely, nobody really wants to talk about it. We tend to talk around it, don't we? We talk about following our passion, finding our purpose, living our best life. All of that matters, don't get me wrong. But none of it really pays the mortgage or keeps the kids in Wi-Fi. So in this episode, it's one I wish that someone had made and sat me down and talked me through it. The real financial conversation about what it actually costs to reinvent yourself at 50 or maybe a little bit older. What the runway looks like, how you could build income when the salary stops, and how you do all of it without gambling away everything that you've spent 3 decades, maybe more, maybe less, trying to build. No fluff, no hustle culture nonsense, just the honest maths of building and creating a new chapter. So, as usual, grab a cup of something good and let's get started. Here's the first thing I had to confront. The salary I'd been earning for some 30 or so years wasn't just income. It was identity, it was security, it was the thing that justified all the hours, all the travel, and all the compromises. And when all of it stopped, even with the redundancy package, the psychological impact was immediate. Because it turns out a lot of my sense of self-worth all came from something being priced in pounds per annum. That's the salary illusion, the belief that your monthly paycheck is a measure of your value rather than just one company's estimate of what your time is worth to them. So back in February 2024, the first exercise I did before anything else was to calculate my actual monthly number, my outgoings. Not what I earned, but what I actually needed to survive. As in the mortgage or rent, I happen to have a mortgage, bills, food, the basic things. Then I added the things that I liked, so not the necessities, the life I wanted to maintain, if you will. Now, if you were to do the same, you'll get 2 different numbers, but both are very important. Here's the thing most people discover when they do this exercise, honestly, myself included. The gap between what I needed and what I was earning was often surprisingly large. And that gap was filled with things that we didn't necessarily need or choose. Office politics, Sunday anxiety, even to the point of being physically ill. Now, I know my eldest son went through that, but fortunately he's kicked that job into the long grass, which is great. He's now doing something that he really enjoys. But we all resonate with that Sunday evening anxiety. Some would also have a commute that was costing maybe 3 hours per day, and you were being compensated, at least in part, for putting up with the things that had nothing to do with your actual skills. However, when you work for yourself, you stop paying that particular and sometimes harsh tax. I'm a huge lover of flying, and you will have seen that in episode 3, so I'm going to pull on the runway analogy. Your runway is the single most important financial concept when you're transitioning out of full-time employment and into something else, and thank Crunchy, it's fairly simple. The premise is really how long you can survive at your current financial burn rate without new income coming in. It may be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could even be 12 months or even longer. The longer your runway, the more options you have. Unfortunately, the shorter your runway, the more pressure that you'll be under, which means the potential decisions that you may make could be worse. I was fortunate enough to have a little bit of a redundancy package when I exited my previous employer in February 2024, which bought me some time. Not forever, but I would say just enough. And if you're in or you're approaching this sort of transition, the most important financial move you can make right now, before you do anything else, is to protect and extend that runway as much as you're able. That means looking at your outgoings and being brutal and honest about them. So that means cutting back on the things that you won't miss, not necessarily slashing everything in a panic, but making deliberate and intentional choices about what the next chapter requires versus what the old chapter had accumulated. When mine hit, the luxury items all went. Most of the TV subscriptions went, save for one. The food and beverage orders to door, that all stopped. And I sold my motorcycle, which, if you're interested, was an Aprilia RSV 1000. It was the bike that I'd wanted ever since it was released. Candidly speaking, it wasn't a requirement. It was definitely a luxury. So if I needed to get around, I would simply just use the car. Here's something that I discovered which I think is slightly counterintuitive. The act of sitting and auditing your finances, really sitting with the numbers, and it's one of the most empowering things that you'll do. I discovered that I didn't want to be fearful of what I may find, and as a result, Mrs. Norf and I audit our finances every 3 to 6 months, and we do a yearly deep dive in January. Now, it can feel really depressing, it's dark outside, well, it is certainly in the UK in January, and to be fair, it can be a little bit depressing anyway, but it is the best way to keep a good, strong handle on where your hard-earned cash is going. Also, I find the actual number is almost never as bad as the fear of the number. Right, practical, because that's what I want this series to be about. So when it comes to income, how do you actually replace a salary when you're starting again in your 50s? From my limited experience, the answer isn't one big thing. The answer is via a stack, multiple income streams, built deliberately and intentionally over time. Each one modest on its own, but when you put them all together, they become very, very significant. And the beauty of building this way is that no single stream failing will take you out. Not like the traditional redundancy model that you may have gone through and I've also experienced. When redundancy punched me in the face for the third time, I vividly remember, and I think it was sometime back in January 24, I vividly remember, and I said to myself, I want to diversify my income to avoid this very thing happening to me again. There's all sorts of ways to stack your income. So here's 5, being counted, 2 of which I'm currently working on as I put this video together. Stream number 1 are freelance services, and this is the fastest path to income in your transition. So take your anchor skill from episode 2, which if you've not seen, I'll post just up here, and also I'll leave it in the description, and offer this to your clients on platforms like Upwork or LinkedIn or through your own network, for example. Freelance work can start generating income within a matter of weeks and not months. It won't replace your salary immediately, so do bear that in mind, but it proves that the model works and keeps money coming in whilst you're building everything else. Stream number 2 are consultancy and advisory services. Your wisdom equity, again from episode 2, has a market. Companies, especially the fast-growing ones, maybe the startups, without your depth of experience in your field, will pay for access to someone who's already made the mistakes that they're about to make. This is high-value, low-volume work. Perhaps 1 or 2 advisory relationships can be worth more than 10 freelance gigs, for example. Now, if you secure these as retainers rather than project work, this will also help the stability of your income as your business ramps. You're able to see what's coming in, therefore you can look at your expenditure. Real good, helpful things. Stream number 3 is content and community. This is what I'm currently building inside TrueNorf, and I'm building momentum with it. Content does take longer to monetize, but the thing is, content compounds, as I'm sure you're aware. YouTube ad revenue, sponsorships, affiliate partnerships, and community memberships all layer on top of each other over time. This is the long game. However, I'm invested in my audience and my community, people like you, and thank you so much for watching, and I'm always looking to share value to support and inspire the things that you're doing. Stream number 4 are digital products. This is something that I'm building. I haven't yet rolled this out, but these could be examples like courses, guides, templates, ebooks, things like that. Take what you know and package it once. Put it in a way where it's easily consumable, and then you're able to sell it repeatedly, almost making money whilst you're asleep. Platforms like Gumroad, Teachable, Substack, and School are great examples. This for me is the closest thing I think to passive income that I'm told works, but again, I'm doing my due diligence and trying to find out a little bit more, because these things help you scale without using a bunch of your time. And finally, stream number 5 in this example are strategic partnerships, affiliates, referrals, and revenue share arrangements with complementary businesses. Once you have an audience or you've built up a bit of a reputation, other people could pay you to introduce them to it. This stream does tend to come last, but when it arrives, it often becomes one of the most effortless streams. I'm sure there are other examples that you're currently thinking of. However, I hope this shortlist gives you a starter for 10. I also want to take this time to add a piece around timelines to set some realistic expectations, and these are from my experience. You may find people who are suggesting all sorts of things, maybe accelerated timelines or things like that, but I just want to share something just from my experience. So here's what a realistic realistic income build looks like for most people. Again, I'm pulling from my experience. So when you're transitioning from full-time to freelance, it may take you about 2 years to get started. So let me break this down. Between months 1 and 3, this is your opportunity to stabilize, audit your finances, extend your runway as far as you can, and land your first piece of freelance work, even if it's really small and underpriced. The goal here isn't income, not fully, but the goal here is a proof of concept. You're proving to yourself that people will pay you outside of full-time employment. That first invoice really matters more than the number that's on it. Trust me, that first invoice is phenomenal. Months 4 to 6 is where you start your build phase. Start raising your freelance rates as you accumulate reviews and results. Begin building your content presence, even if it's 1 piece a week, but it does compound fast. Identify maybe 2 or 3 potential advisory clients from your existing network. Launch your first digital product, but keep it super simple. In the meantime, continue doing your research and expand into your adjacencies. Months 7 to 12 are where you stack. By month number 12, me and potentially most other people who have worked this deliberately are generating a meaningful income across 2 or 3 or maybe 4 different streams. It won't look like your old salary, potentially not just yet. It will for others, but maybe not for some, because every ounce of currency where you are will feel like yours. You chose it, you built it. Nobody can make you redundant from that. When you hit year 2 and beyond, you continue to compound. This is where it gets really interesting, because the content typically takes about 6 months to start to build and generating a passive income. It hasn't yet for me, but I'm still on that trajectory. Advisory relationships will deepen and they will renew. Your digital product library will also grow. The income streams that felt really small individually start to stack up into something that really does become substantial and far more resilient than one single employer ever was. There are some great tools available to you as you're starting out. Now, I use certain AI tools to help me ideate and frame out what a runway could look like for me. Use them well and use them wisely, but always do your due diligence and research thoroughly. Now, I dare not sit here and tell you that money doesn't matter. Absolutely not. Of course it does matter. It's the thing that gives you options, and options is what this whole series is about. However, here's a significant thing that I've learned in the time since being made redundant. The income that I'm building now, albeit slower, messier, more uncertain than a corporate salary, feels completely different to any paycheck that I've ever received. Why? Because it's mine. All of it. Every stream, every client, every sale. Nobody signed it off. Nobody set the ceiling. Nobody can call me on a Tuesday and take it away. Okay, I'll grant you, my clients may choose to end their relationship with me, but that's where I've got to keep my clients front and center of everything that I do. The money conversation nobody really has is about this. It's not about income, it's about ownership, about building something that belongs completely and utterly to you, and also built on your own terms. The bonus is you get to work with people and companies that you choose to. You also get to choose not to work with companies that you don't want to. I really encourage you to do the financial audit, get to know your number, protect your runway, and start stacking. The 51st chapter isn't free, but it's worth every penny or cent or specific level of currency where you live. And that's it for this episode. If you did find it useful, please do share it. There may be someone in your world or in your network making this transition right now who perhaps may be a bit too embarrassed to ask the money questions out loud. This might just give them permission to do so. Episode 5 is where we talk about one of your most powerful assets, and it's the connections that you've made, your network. If you think that LinkedIn is just a bunch of connections with old colleagues gathering digital dust, I'd ask you to think again. You're going to want to watch that one for sure. Thank you so much for watching. This is the 51st chapter, and in this phase, your salary was never the measure of your worth. It was always the price that somebody else put on your time. And now you get the chance to change that.